Thank you all, and good morning, and welcome to Progressive Web Apps with Angular and Firebase. As you heard, I am Erik Haddad, and my Twitter handle is @ErikHaddad. Follow me for tech news and some bad jokes, and photos and videos of my airplane falling apart over the ocean. Now, that was a couple weeks ago, and I had a pleasant trip out here, and it's safe to say that Finland is one of the coolest countries I've ever visited. Now, I grew up in the northeast of the United States, and eventually I switched coast to Google, where I am a UX engineer on the Firebase team. Now, what are we going to cover today? So we're going to start at the basics, and what is Angular, what is PWA, what is Firebase. We're going to see how Angular and Firebase play well together in a nice little library. We're going to see how to use it, and then we're going to have a little demo app, check out the Firebase console, and then we're going to benchmark our app to make sure it is a true PWA. Now, real quick, I know this is day 2, probably been beaten into you by now, but what is Angular? Now, the goal of Angular is to make it easy to build applications with the web. And just a clarification, AngularJS implies V1, and Angular implies version 2+. Now, at the heart of Angular is the Angular CLI. And with an ngG, you can scaffold and generate. With an ngServe, you can serve and develop. And with an ngBuild, you can build and distribute. And lastly, testing with an ngTest. And your Angular code can take many different forms, portable front end, and PWA, which I'll be talking about today, which gives a little bit more of a native and powerful experience. Ionic is a hybrid mobile experience. NativeScript is a native app for mobile, and Electron targets your desktop. Cool, now that that's out of the way, what's a progressive web app? Now, if you attended Simona's talk yesterday, you got a little glimpse of it, and you know now that PWAs are a big deal. Now, why is that? Well, it's about radically improving your user experience, and through that, we need to make our app more reliable. We need to make it fast and engaging. Now, how do we do that? Well, PWAs load instantly regardless of network state. And the service workers behind the scenes know about that network state and can serve local or remote content. Now, over half of your users will abandon your site if it doesn't load within 3 seconds. That's huge. We want to keep people on the site, and we also want them to be engaged. Now, we can pin the web app to the home screen, and it'll act just like a native app, and we can theme it with colors and icons and text, and also accept push notifications in the background. Now, behind the scenes, the service worker is the powerhouse. It's a script that runs behind the scenes, and it's separate from your web page, and it does a lot of the syncing and accepting of push messages without you having to intervene. And we can tailor that service worker to serve up the content that we want. So it will have an intimate knowledge of the offline cache to serve up if we are in offline mode. And therefore, the service worker acts as a proxy. It handles all the things that you shouldn't have to think about and serves up a wonderful user experience. Now, how does Angular fit into this? Well, Angular knows that PWAs are also a big deal. They are making your applications service worker aware and PWA ready, making them PWA by default, Angular v5 and v6. You can explicitly tell it to enable that service worker. And from that command, it will go into your .angular CLI.json and set service worker to true. And that's where the magic begins. And how simple is your code? Well, here's a simple push messaging handle. It's an observable. And just with this, your push notifications are enabled. Now, what are the components of this Angular PWA approach? Well, we have a manifest.json and NGSW config that we, as developers, can tailor the experience. Now, Angular will step in, look at those files, and then they will generate an ngsw.json and an ngsw worker.js. And that is the powerhouse. Here's a sample manifest.json. We can specify some names, some icons, some theme colors, some orientation, whether portrait or landscape, whether it takes up the whole screen, etc. And of course, a start URL. And hopefully you can read that, but this is an NGSW where you can specify your approach to assets and data, whether you want to be greedy or lazy, prefetch, and all these things. This is your opportunity to tune your app. And then this is the kind of output you get with the asset groups and data groups based on freshness or whatever approach you want to take. And you can see an example with the hash table. When you build your app, there are some cache busting mechanisms with the build, and this will be generated for you so you don't have to manually update. Cool, so now we know Angular, PWA, we know how they work together. What is Firebase? Well, I can tell you what Firebase is not. This is a traditional app development environment. You may be familiar with LAMP architectures, mean architectures. They all involve a server and database. They all involve maintenance, security, scalability, a lot of things that you have to consider. Well, Firebase replaces all of that with one SDK that unlocks a whole bunch of features, such as database and storage, and with a few lines of config code, you're up and running. Now these are the developer primitives for real-time database, authentication, and storage. This is what Firebase was most known for many, many years ago, and are still the baseline of the offering. Now, database, what's really nice is if you make a change, everybody else's UI updates in real time, no need for a page refresh. Now, auth. This is pretty difficult stuff. As a developer, you don't want to focus on input text and making sure an email fits your regex and your password and confirm and make sure you salted it with security and it's stored and you don't get hacked. And there's a whole bunch of things you don't want to have to think about. You want to focus on innovating. Well, Firebase offers a bunch of providers such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, even phone auth. We'll also provide email and anonymous auth, and we'll also send emails and reset passwords if you're so inclined. Now with all that, all the different providers, we mix that into one auth record. And it's a very powerful thing. If you were to one day log in with your Google account and the next day on Facebook, we know you're the same person. Firebase storage, it might be used to AWS S3. Much the same way, it is secure. It will persist the upload regardless of your network connection, and you can be assured that it is scalable in the cloud. Now, cloud functions for Firebase. It's kind of the glue between all the services and your way of having a serverless approach and connecting to the outside world. No need to spin up a box just to do tasks. Much the same that I just said, lets you extend and connect Firebase and cloud products with code. It's purely event-driven, so for your database, if there's an on-write event, for auth on create, analytics on log, storage, HTTP, and PubSub, all these events, it will handle, it'll recognize the event, and you write some Node.js code, and there's even TypeScript support now, and you can handle it. If this happens, do this. And like I said, there are a bunch of different services that are supported. And one such example, let's say you have an image upload. A user uploads a full size. Now, being a PWA, we want the most performance. So we want even thumbnails, or we want to downsize, or convert a ping to WebP, or something of that nature. Whatever you want to do, as soon as the full size gets uploaded, functions will look at that and will cut different thumbnails, resolutions, whatever you want to do. Very, very powerful. And out on GitHub, there are lots of different examples. Next up, so we talked about real-time database, and In Google Cloud, there's a data store product. It's a NoSQL database. We've combined the best of both to make Firebase Cloud Firestore. Now, it combines the ease of use and real-time capabilities of the real-time database that I spoke about earlier, but adds the scalability and rich querying capability that users have asked for years and years. Also adds some new security rules, and most importantly for this talk, there's built-in offline support. And I'll go into that a bit more. Like I said, it, just like real-time database, will bind your UI to your data and handles the synchronization for you. And if you're used to MongoDB, it's a collection document model. So you should be quite familiar with that. Gives strong, rich data types and gives a bit more hierarchical structure to your data. Here's an example of a sample document. Some pretty straightforward strings, arrays, numbers, etc. And within collection, you have a bunch of documents. Now, this is what the real-time database looked like. You had to denormalize in order to do shallow querying and have it be performant. No need to think about that now. Structure your data however you'd like. Whether you query one record or a million, it's the same performance. It's magical. And you can use sub-collections and sub-collections and sub-collections. We must go deeper. And you have serverless auth, rules, persistence, and a lot of developer tools that you have in a real-time database. That's all great. And here's a way to help you decide one or the other. Now, like I said, this is the biggest thing. Offline persistence, this is huge for our PWAs. Serving from local cache, we don't have to write any web SQL. We don't have to access session storage, local storage, and be confined. Now we have a database that works offline. And when you are offline and you modify this data, as soon as the network connection comes back up with the service worker, we push out those writes and we handle any kind of conflicts. And there's caching, and while you're offline, it acts just as it was while it was online. Like I mentioned, the conflict resolution, syncing caching, and full web support. Lastly, Firebase hosting. For PWAs, it's a requirement that it be served over HTTPS, SSL, and lucky for you, it's free. You get that out of the box. It's easy to roll back and manage versions, and it's a CDN that works around the world. So, knowing now all of that and how it all plays in PWAs and Angular, let's see how Angular and Firebase specifically work together. Now, just want to make a note, for AngularJS support, there's AngularFire without a version number after, and then AngularFire 2 is specifically for V2 and up, and especially tuned for V5 and 6. Cool, so it's all based on the power of RxJS and observables. So the real timeliness of Firebase is married with RxJS, and you get the full real-time experience, and that involves authentication and your data and storage. And these are some of the things that are happening behind the scenes, and a big thing with performance and PWAs, with tree shaking and making sure your footprint is at a minimal. You can include whatever modules you want. You don't have to use them all. Now here is going overboard and including all of them. But here's how simple it is. And here in the initialize app, you'll see an environment.firebase. And here are the few lines of code that from the console we will provide you with. You copy pasted it in, and you're up and running. Now, how do I get this into my component? Well, you have a constructor, and you can inject whatever you need in there. Pretty straightforward. Authentication. I mean, this is quite simple. You don't have the input text, the input password, and all this. It's just that simple. Through all these examples, there's no more than 15 lines of HTML or TypeScript code. So in this example, there's a login and log out using the Google Auth provider. and it'll pop open and handle the OAuth flow for you, and you're up and running. Now, real-time database has an idea of lists, and here is all of your CRUD operations, getting the data back, adding, updating, deleting, and then because it is an observable, you have the async pipe, and we're just printing out the JSON for each one of those items, those objects. Likewise, Firestore collections, much the same, observable based. We're checking for any value changes, and on any change, our subscription updates, and we can print out the content. And the real-time database objects, we have save, update, and delete, and here's some very basic HTML to enable you to do all that. And for Firestore documents, very similar to real-time database objects, here's the way to implement that with minimal amounts of code. Now, AngularFire 2, with respect to real-time database, kind of filled the gap for querying that wasn't there in the regular JavaScript SDK. So querying is a killer feature here, and it's using subject from RxJS. So as your subject updates, the response updates, and your UI updates. It was a magical feature. And then built into Firestore natively is querying. So you can see there's less code here involved and a little bit more powerful with chaining, and much the same front end. And for storage, this just came out 5 weeks ago, and I love this. It saved me about 60 lines of code in my app. So just this right here, super powerful, and will make our lives much easier. Cool. So let's see how all that comes together in an Angular Firebase PWA. Introducing FireChat. Now I'll go through the full flow here. First off, I'm just going to refresh the page, and you see how it loads quite quickly. You can see the contents of the manifest.json here on the right side, which is pretty cool. You can see that service workers are up and running. And then just for fun, we're going to go into offline mode. And I have an observable here looking at network state. And pray to the demo gods, I'm going to refresh it. And once you know it, offline works. Pretty cool. So we're going to go back online. Yay. Now we're going to sign in. And we are provided with these different sign-in methods. I'm going to pop open, use my Gmail account. Boom, we are in. Now I'm going to make this a little bit wider here for full experience, and we're connected. So I'm going to create a room and say ngVikings. Brr. All right, so there's my room. Okay, and this is too bright for me. I'm going to change my theme, and that persists to the database. Now I'm going to say good morning. Cool, so that's going to send it out, depending on Wi-Fi. This is going to send it up to Firestore, and I have a function that's looking at it and saying, okay, I see a new value. And it's going to translate it to all these different languages for me. So in Finnish, Portuguese, I don't speak these languages, Guten Morgen, French. Yeah, so all this is happening behind the scenes. You have a real-time translated app. Now, just to play around with this in Finnish, let's say Kiitos. Cool, so this is going to go up as Kiitos, and I'm going to switch over to English and see what that means. Hello, Wi-Fi. How about that? Thank you. And we have some other visitors. And before this gets out of hand, I'm going to move on to the next. So let's test storage. Now, here's our Fire guy. And using the same exact code that I had on the slide earlier, this is now uploading it. And now it's in Firebase storage, which is awesome. And another rule for PWA is it has to be responsive. So there it is, our responsiveness. Pretty cool. All right, and just to check in on the state of our service worker, you can always add ngsw/state to the end of the domain, and you can see the state of your service worker. And that's working hard right now. Anyway, very straightforward app here, a lot of fun. Code is out on GitHub. I'll share the link at the end. Let's go back here. So console exploration, what does all that look like? Well, in authentication, sorry in advance for sharing any PII, these are all the people who have logged in, okay? And you can manage whether they are reset password, disabled, delete, all that stuff, which is really cool. And you have the different sign-in methods, which I have enabled here. And if you want to send custom email sign-ups, you have that at your disposal here. So database, what does that look like? Me firing off that message, our user profiles, etc. Pretty straightforward with some collections and some documents. So messages, this was the output of each message, and German, English, Spanish, etc. So super powerful, clean, and usable. And our rules, making sure at this point people who are using this are logged in. It's not open to writes from around the world. And this is what storage looks like. Like I said, the concept of uploading an image, I have a full-size image here. I'm not doing thumbnails right now, but this is quite simple, and I have example code out there. And there's my Fire guy. Pretty cool. All right, so we know it works. We know how it looks in the console. Let's make sure that it's performant. So over here, I ran an audit earlier. I'm in incognito mode, probably not for the reason you use it. But here we see it's a progressive web app score of 100. And the Lighthouse tool will tell you what that means and guide you to make it more performant. Like, I can see that my paint is pretty slow. I have some blocking CSS. I have some blocking JavaScript. I need to minimize my footprint, but this is still pretty good. Now, accessibility, super important, making sure alt tags and it's tabbable. This will help you become a better developer. And lastly, best practices. It'll give you, it'll put you through some audits and then recommend some changes. So it's super powerful. Like I said, it used to be, or it's called Lighthouse. It used to be a separate extension. Now it's baked right into Chrome Developer Tools and an Audits tab. Cool. And site is served over HTTPS, and Firebase hosting has enabled that for us. We double checked that it's responsive on tablets and mobile devices. In our manifest.json, you saw I specified an index.html as a start, and the first thing we did was test that it was offline compliant. All good. Manifest.json had metadata for pinning it to the home screen. And then Lighthouse took care of the rest, testing on 3G, cross-browser transitions, and each page has a URL. Now, this might seem like there's a lot of red, and there is. The history of this, Chrome is on the forefront, and in the last month or so, there have been some positive updates and some reassurance here with the distribution of usage. If you write your PWA today, it'll work, and it will be widely supported. And be reassured, these are all from the last month, that Safari on iOS and desktop, Firebase for Android, and Microsoft Edge on Windows 10 will all be supporting PWA very, very soon. So your work will not go in vain. Real quick summary here. PWAs are a big deal, and Angular provides the tooling for us. Firebase handles all of the tedious tasks that we have to do as developers, but allows you to focus on the innovation part. AngularFire is Firebase and Angular taking the best pieces on top of RxJS and providing a real-time observable interface. And you can benchmark your app right from Chrome Developer Tools using Lighthouse. And I can't say this enough, work smart, not hard. Focus on the innovation and let Firebase do the rest for you. And the best part, it's all free. So go ahead and hack away on Firebase, it's free. And nice thing is, when you create a Firebase project, it is a Google Cloud project. So if your Snapchat idea starts off in Firebase and you need even more scalability and control, it's already a Google Cloud project, and you can jump into the console and enable those extra things easily. And there are a bunch of other things that Firebase offers that I couldn't talk about today. I encourage you to check out the console. Some credits and references here. I'll be sharing the slides on Twitter shortly after this talk. And Ketos. Again, I'm at Erik Haddad. Demo URL is firechat.social, and the code is out on GitHub. It was a pleasure coming back for ngVikings 2018. I had a great time. Thank you.